Welcome to the PowerCat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Now let's go to Kansas City, home of GPC's hidden studio. Here's your host, Cole Carmody.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in here to this week's version of Fighting Ever Fighting. I'm Cole Carmody of GoPowercat.com, and this week we're joined by Elijah Lee, the former Kansas State linebacker hailing from Blue Springs, Missouri. Elijah, first off, thanks so much for joining me this week, man. I know you got a lot going on, but man, before we even get started, I got to bring this up because I think every K-State fan, when they think about your time in Manhattan, they think about the picture that's become famous now of you staring down the neck of the Kansas offensive line, and Carter Stanley's right there in the background, man. One of the
Yeah,
best pictures, I think, in K-State football history. Just how cool is it to kind of have that moment still in time?
honestly, by that time, we're in a good groove, so that picture means that much more because that was one of Coach Snyder's last couple years. So it's
Mhm.
monumental, and then with it just being the Jayhawks, it just all plays a perfect picture, right? And that's something I most definitely whenever I buy my house, I'll put it in my man cave.
I think a lot of K-State fans might have that picture in their man cave too. It just kind of symbolizes what that rivalry is, man. But I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of the beginning because that's what we do on this show. We like to hear the stories of all of our guests, man. And you have an interesting story. Coming out of Blue Springs South High School, two-time Buck Buchanan
Blue
Award
Springs,
winner.
Blue Springs.
Blue Springs. I say Blue
Yeah,
Springs
yeah.
South. Oh, there is a major difference between the Jaguars and the Wildcats. Trust me, I
Most
know.
definitely.
You rocked that Power Cat twice.
Yeah.
Coming out of Blue Springs, man, you had some pretty good teammates. I know that recruiting process must have been crazy for you, but I don't think people really realize how good this area. I live in Kansas City now, but just how
Yeah.
good this area has high school football, man. And you guys were part of that.
Yeah, I think honestly, I mean, like you said, Kansas City area is growing in football, right? But in those 2 years, what is it? 2012, and we graduated 14, so it was 12 season,
Hmm.
13 season. Um, Honestly, that was probably one of the most special years, if not the most special year in Kansas City, because you got to think about it. From just a D line perspective, it was me, which I went to K State, went to the
Hmm.
NFL, and then there was the twins that went to Nebraska, played in the NFL, also were drafted. Just the D line alone, I mean, there wasn't too much running from us, right?
Right.
And then also on that team we had Darius Shepard. He went to
Hmm.
North Dakota State. He played in the NFL as well. And then a part of us four, we had Dalvin that went to K State, Caleb that went to K State. We had a buddy that Jordan Benson that went to Colorado State, and then as a collective between guys, there's probably like 10 to 13, 14 guys that went and continued to play ball after college at it doesn't matter the level, right?
Right.
Because
For sure.
uh, a good player can excel anywhere. And most of our good players ended up going somewhere. Now between two classes, we probably had 20 kids on one team that all went somewhere one year and then the year after. So it's like, how often do you get that experience, let alone have four pros on one team?
No, you're 100% right. And I know coming out of high school, you guys talked about coming to K State. Dalvin Warmack, you mentioned Caleb, but especially Dalvin. I mean, another guy, a two-time Simone Award winner. When you guys were kind of going through that recruiting process and Coach Snyder and the rest of the staff started to show serious interest, was that kind of one of those things where you guys looked around the room and were like, man, you know how cool it would be if we got to continue playing together? And I guess kind of walk me through your recruiting process and what that was like.
It's funny you say that because at first we were all excited about the offers we were getting, but a lot of our offers were coming in. I wouldn't say a package deal, but we got offered by similar schools, right?
Mhm.
So at first it was like I know Caleb wanted to go to Oklahoma State. Dalvin thought about going to ASU or Oklahoma State, and then I thought about going to Iowa or Nebraska. But then the stronger our bond was, the closer we got. We were a pretty good group of friends, right? It turned into I think we could all go play together in college. Because at one point we all wanted to go somewhere. We were like, how cool would it be for three guys to go to one school? And then, whenever you start talking things like that, I think it ended up being the whole coaching staff all on deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Coach Miller, Coach Dimmel, Coach Mo Lattimore, Coach Cox, Coach Snyder, Coach Hayes, like all the coaching staff. At one point, we had at the school, and for Coach Snyder to pull up to your high school
Yeah.
in this area and what he means, it's kind of like how Saban pulls up nationally, right? But
Yeah.
locally, when Coach Snyder comes to you and sits down in a room with you, it's kind of like, I mean, it's an eye opener because
Mm-hmm.
there's so many people in this world that respect him beyond football, and you don't understand it at that point. But at that point in time, we were just like, man, it'd be cool if we could all go to school together.
And you guys make that decision. You end up at K State. For you, no red shirt, which is kind of a rare occurrence
Yeah.
with K State standards, especially with Coach Snyder. Was that kind of the plan? And when you found out that you didn't have to redshirt, I could only imagine how excited you were to get to play your true freshman season.
See, I like situations like this because now you get to know the in depth and the build up of the story.
Hmm.
So I was a DN in high school, right? K State was probably one of the few schools that was like, we want you to play linebacker. And I'm like, being 195, being a DN, probably not going to work out well.
Hmm.
And realistically, Caleb and Dalvin were supposed to play before me. They were bigger prospects than me, right? But by the time I got to K State, I've always been somebody that overcomes. So I leached on to Jordan Willis.
Hmm.
And at that time, Jordan Willis he got some snaps as a freshman. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
And
Yep.
I knew he was around the KC area. I'm like, that's the guy that does it right. So in the summer, I'm like, I got to find a way. So that freshman year, I was more of the pass rush guy. And in practice, leading up in training camp, I started to figure out the competition. Not saying I'm better than somebody, but I was just that confident. And I was like, I know I could at least get on the field in a certain package. And it came in time, I kind of just went to the coaches with a leap of faith and was just like, hey, coach, like, I see where I'm at. I've been competing all summer. I've been proving my worth. I've been doing the necessary things to put myself in position. It's going to be a situation where I'm not really looking to redshirt. And if I redshirt, I'm looking to go JUCO.
Hmm.
And I told the coaches just realistically, like the plan I had in my head wasn't just go 3 years and leave. It was I'm that competitive, I'm that confident, and that's the mentality of a K State guy, right? You work hard, and things come to fruition, and that's what happened. It ended up, and the coach was like, honestly, you've had a great summer. We've already been talking about putting you in the jet package. You'll get the rush off the edge. You won't get to play linebacker because we had Truman, we had Will Davis, we had Mike Moore, we had Decory. And I was like, I can understand that as long as I got a role. Like, as
Hmm.
long as I could get in and play. And then that Stephen F. Austin game, I had 2 sacks. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm glad I could prove my worth in the first game. I understand it was Stephen F. Austin, but I was also 18 years old, and that was my first collegiate game.
Right. Well, and it's crazy we talk about that now and kids making the decision, should I redshirt, should I not redshirt? Well, now with the new NCAA rules, you get 4 games. And
Yeah,
so, I talked to these guys who played in the old redshirt rules, and I'm like, man, if I would have had that, like I could have played 4 games, I could have kept that extra year.
yeah,
You go on and then your sophomore season become all Big 12. But you guys as a team, man, like that is an interesting part. That's an interesting history of K State because coming off of the Big 12 championship, there's a lot of really, really good teams and really good players that you played with. And I think that era kind of gets forgotten. I mean, Jesse Ertz is probably one of the more underrated quarterbacks that
most
that
definitely.
K State's had in a really long time. You've obviously been around a lot of really good quarterbacks, but played with some really, really good players in your 3 years at K State.
Yeah. You got to think about it. We had Will Geary. I don't think anybody could move him. Whether he was going to go play at the professional level or just go on in different walks of life, there was nobody that was stronger than him at the moment. Then we had Jordan Willis. Then we had Jesse Ertz. I had the pleasure of playing with Jake Waters. People don't
Mm,
understand that. Curry Sexton, Tyler Lockett, Cody Whitehair, BJ Finney. There's a lot of guys on that team. Dante Barnett, Denzel McDaniels. Like, there's a lot of guys that were on that team. So it wasn't just like I was a dude. Like, we had a team full of dudes, and we had walk-ons. Walk-ons that worked just as hard as anybody else in the country and played just as hard. And they showed up. And some of the games you joke about it, but our two deep ended up being a lot of walk-ons. That's why I commend them, because I've been alongside of them. I've seen the work they put in. So a place like Manhattan was special to understand, like, nobody's better than anybody, and everybody works just as hard.
And it's crazy because K-State is still that developmental program. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at Felix Anudike-Uzama, there's a picture of him that always floats around of him going to a K-State camp looking like he's 175 pounds soaking wet. And
Yeah.
now he's a first round pick of the Kansas City Chiefs. And so, so many similar stories, not just with walk-ons, but, guys like yourself who maybe aren't the most highly touted 5-star prospects who find a way to grind through it and come out better on the other side.
Yeah.
You played 3 years at K-State, and when you got finished with your junior season, just like every single player, that NFL draft clock starts to begin. Did you think about, hey, maybe I can come back for one more year? Or was it kind of one of those things where, hey, I had this season, this is the highest I think my draft stock is going to be able to be, so I want to just take advantage of it right then and there?
When you get older, I've learned that there's decisions that you make at the time being for the situation because it makes sense. And for me, people got to understand, I'm 20 years old. Uh, my family's in an unfortunate situation, as a lot of people's are.
Hmm.
Whenever you're going into that, you're thinking about making that next move. As a young man, you think of, how can I be a provider? Now, I understand, and growing up and learning, some kids aren't put in that position, but some of us are. So to say I'm the only one that was in that position, I don't think that was it. I mean, there's a lot of stories like mine, but for me, at the time being, I felt like there was nothing I can lose by taking a shot, looking at the opportunity. Yeah, if I failed, I could have went back to college and got my degree right then and there, right? But for me, it was taking a leap of faith. I'm a betting man, right? I played 6 years in the NFL, and I can never regret, you know, my decision. Now could have went differently if I stayed one more year, but at the same time, you got to think about it. Football's what, 99% injury rate?
Hmm.
What happens if I blow my knee? I had already had surgery on plantar fasciitis a year before, and just being banged up. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, I had a jersey finger. I had a ligament that's torn off my finger. I'm like, at the end of the day, like, you can only place your sports window is only so long, right?
Hmm.
Now, I could say if I stayed a year, I could have been a first rounder, second round, third rounder. But at the end of the day, the Lord gives you battles that He knows you can handle. And I just felt like I was put in that position. Um, right or wrong, I know some people don't understand it, and I'm glad I can speak on it. But when you understand, and growing up, whenever you're the man of the house, and it's unfortunate you got to do it earlier than others, you got to provide for your family. So if your family's backs against a wall, what would you do?
Hmm.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors. Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
Yeah, I think that is a commendable thing to do. Guys talk about that all the time, and you brought it up. You played 6 years in the NFL. The average lifespan of an NFL player is less than a year, right? I mean, most
Yeah,
guys do not even make it past that first year. And another guy who had kind of a similar situation, could have came back to college was your running back, Alex Barnes. I know that was another thing,
yeah,
but I don't think and I know there's nobody inside of that building. I mean it, right or wrong, coaches will support their players' decisions.
yeah,
And I think, as we kind of transition and kind of talk about your time in the NFL, man, you have an interesting story because you've been a lot of places. And I
yeah,
think that, most of the time when fans see NFL players, they see, oh, it's the Patrick Mahomes, it's the Travis Kelce's, the guys who've kind of been in one or two spots that are the stars. But a majority of the guys aren't like that. You need those role players to help you win games. And so you kind of took that role as kind of being a journeyman. And I just want to know, like, how fun was that? Because I'm sure you'd like to be settled down in one place, but the fact that one week you're over here and then the next week you're over here, I can imagine that there's kind of some fun to that.
There's fun in it, but at the same time, so I got drafted in Minnesota. What happened was, talked to the GM. It was a situation where they were trying to hide me. They knew I was young. They were waiting for me to mature in my body, my mind, and just understanding the game. So they're like, you'll be on practice squad. You'll make this X amount, which I have to start off by saying practice squad money
Yeah.
is still more than the average.
Right.
That's doctor money, right?
Hmm.
So you could talk down on the guy for being on practice squad, but at the end of the day, he works half a year and makes what people are working a full year doing. Now it's not guaranteed, but it's still a job at the end of the day, right? And you're doing what you love. So I was on practice squad for a week in Minnesota. I fully furnished the apartment. I bought everything in my apartment. That same that we played on a Monday night. Tuesday, I'm thinking it's just an off day. Like, oh, I'll just wake up late, play the game, and go back to practice Wednesday. I'll wake up to like 20 missed calls in week one of my rookie season from San Fran. And they're like, you need to get on this plane. And I'm like, I mean, I don't even know what that means. They're like, well, you're going to be playing this week, so you need to get going. So I take it back to the Vikings. I'm like, hey, is it possible for you guys to sign me to the 53? If not, I'm going to San Fran. And they're like, well, we have to work some things out. You'll end up getting your time, but it's just not now. I was like, well,
See
I'm
ya.
going to San Fran.
Yeah.
And it was a blessing because San Fran, my journey was crazy. Rookie year, I played a few defensive snaps, but I didn't know I had to carve my role as a special teams player. So that started to develop. My second year, I started 5 games, finished the year with 68 tackles, a sack, a forced fumble. My first game starting against the Lions was like week two. I had 12 tackles, a sack, a TFL, or a forced fumble. That year went on. Then the next year, I'm in a position to be the starting Sam, but I tear the ligament in my thumb.
Hmm.
And everybody knows the most available is the most dependable, and those are the ones that get the
Right.
opportunity. And I missed time. So then at same time, I tore my thumb. I wasn't ready till like November, but I thought it was going to be a quick turnaround. Well, then so I was on practice squad. But what people don't understand, I was probably the last highest paid ever practice squad. I was making 645K on practice squad. So
Jeez.
so to tell me, and the other thing that people understand, if I was ever on practice squad, it was either even with the new rules, and I'll talk about it. I was elevated and I played the whole season.
Right.
It
Right.
wasn't. That was my first time I sat out 8 games because my thumb. I was injured.
Hmm.
Later that year, I get pulled up. I started 2 games against Arizona, Seattle, at the same position. Played solid, and then the playoffs come. That's when COVID hit.
Oh.
Um, you could say what you want. Oh, he's just special teams, but I made two monumental tackles in the Super Bowl. Not only on top of that, I got to play against the home team, the Chiefs.
Hmm.
So that stage was just wild. Then it's
Yeah.
the next year I go to Detroit. I, I took a chance with Detroit, but honestly, it didn't fit me, and I didn't fit their system. And I just made that executive decision. I asked my agent. I was like, "Hey, um, it's a bad season. I just asked, can we ask for my release?" And they're like, "Oh no, just give us a few more weeks." And then it happened. And then I was so ready to get out of Detroit. I drove 12 hours back to Kansas City. And the next day, I didn't know how the waiver wire worked. The Cleveland Browns picked me up the next day.
And now you got to go back to Cleveland. And now
Yeah,
you got
so
to go
now
to
I got to go
Cleveland.
back to Cleveland. I'm like, oh, I'm not driving. I'm
Yeah.
flying. I'm leaving my car. There's half a season left. I'll just rent a car.
Hmm.
So I was in Cleveland the last half. The next year, I signed back with Cleveland. The older you get, the more money you make, right?
Hmm.
The older you get, if you're on day one of the roster, your contract's guaranteed. The older you get, they try to replace you every year.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a situation, we had a point system. I led in a point system. I did everything I needed to make the team. And going to the GM's office, it was you did everything you needed to do to make the team, but we have rookies and we want to give them extra time. And we know we can put you on practice squad. And we don't want you to leave because you'll be up the first 3 games if we don't figure it out, and then you'll play the rest of the season.
Hmm.
I'm all right, here we go with this again.
Yeah.
So then week 1, I'm on practice squad. By week 2, the Chiefs actually try to come get me. And I tell them it makes more sense for me to just go be on practice squad there
Yeah.
than just be here. And they're like, oh no, we'll figure it out. So they ended up signing me to the 53, and I stayed on the 53-man roster. We had a rotation of 5 or 6 backers, so I was fortunate to play in a
Mm-hmm.
role, multiple different roles, play on special teams. And then the next year, I get signed early to the Chiefs. And I'm like, this is the match made in
Yeah.
heaven, because I've been wanting to play for the Chiefs because it's the home team. I'm more mature. I can make the right decisions. I'm smart. Uh, the same situation happens the next year.
Yeah.
They're trying to get Blake Bell into the season so he's not on season-ending IR. And they tell me, well, you're a vet. We know you don't have to go through waivers, so we'll just sign you back to P squad. You'll play 3 games, and then we'll go from there. Well, we'll sign you after week 1, and I know the game. It's so we don't have to guarantee you your contract, and then we
Mm-hmm.
could kind of put you as that limbo guy. So I'm like, okay. Because the call was I have 90% good, 10% bad. 90% good, you made the team. 10%, we have to cut you P squad the first game. The
Right.
second game, we'll have you sign back. I'm like, okay. Well, the same situation. Other teams are trying to come get rookies. They're like, oh, we need more time. Um, we'll figure it out. So I played 5 games. In those 5 games, I had 6 tackles on special teams. I led the special teams up to week 14, 15. And I'm frustrated up to that point. I'm asking, I'm like, hey, like, it might be time for me to get out of here. I stayed long enough to where I could cherish some moments. I was happy to be home. I played, but I also
Right.
know you need film to play. So when the opportunity came, so a lot of people don't know the rules. If you're with the team a certain amount of the season, I was there for 16 weeks, 15, 15, 16 weeks. I put in my time. I knew that I was eligible to get a Super Bowl ring if they went all the way, plus the playoff bonuses. And I'm like, to further my career, I'm going to go get film. So I ended up going to Chicago. Went to Chicago, played my last 3. I thought I did enough in that time to prove that I was able to play the next year. And it didn't happen, but at the same time, I understood, and I like to use the Lord as how many times can you ask for one more year?
Right.
The average career is 2.5 years, 3 years. I played 6 years. So how many more times can I keep asking just one more year, just one more year? And that was my career. I can hang my hat. I have a Super Bowl ring with the home team. I played in the Super Bowl, so I know what the experience is like. I have all this knowledge, this experience I could bring on to the next path of life. And that's all I can be grateful for. I was able to get a head start. I was smart with my money. And that's what I look at it as, a head start in life.
Man, I tell you what, it's crazy because you're right. A lot of people have no idea what goes on behind the scenes, man. And before we get you out of here, I just got to ask you one question, man. You've had an insane football experience, and like I said,
Yeah.
you played with some amazing players. You played with Patrick Mahomes. You played with name it. You've played with them. If you could think back to just one moment that maybe stands above the rest, I know you talked about playing in the Super Bowl, and I'm sure that might be one. What's the one moment where you're like, man, I'm just so happy I got to experience this?
I'm like, man, is honestly that first game playing against the Detroit Lions, my first start in my NFL career. That was my okay, I belong here. Because at that time, you're in your second year, you're trying to figure it out, right? The only way you get to become a vet is if you play 3 years and 3 games. It's not if you play 2 years, not if you
Mhm.
play one year. the saying around the league is if you play 3 years and 3 games, you know you belong. So I'm in my second year. I'm getting to maximize my opportunity. Uh, to say I knew it was going to go like that, 12 tackles, a sack against Matt Stafford, um, to make a difference in that game because the ball is everything, as you say, on a football team, right? The more opportunities you have with the ball, the more opportunities you have to win. And that was my moment. It was just like, okay, I belong here. I'm gonna make a career out of this.
Well, Elijah, man, I know for a fact whenever K-State Nation watched you play, with whether it was with the Niners, with the Bears, with the Lions, with the Chiefs, it didn't matter that they had your back. And great catching up with you. I'm sure fans are very excited to hear your story, man. I appreciate you taking some time, and
I appreciate
good
you.
luck with you. Good luck to
Thank you.
everything in the future.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody, so much for watching.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.